Our guest in this episode of A Story to Tell has a rich background family history. So rich that he has written his childhood memoirs, full of intrigue, romance, bravery and resilience. Actually, it is still yet to be completed. He has also written a novel, a huge novel. When his father was only 10 years old, his grandfather was brutally killed, caused by jealousy and racial hatred. The family name has been changed over the years, not always by choice. Our guest today was not born in Australia, but it would be hard to find anyone more proud of being an Australian. He is a man of many talents. Not only can he look good in a leotard, he is an ex-classical guitarist, and he can still remember the name of his first girlfriend when he was only 9. Please enjoy Raffi Ghazarian. He has a story to tell. Good morning, Raffi. It's fantastic to be here in your wonderful, beautiful new home.
I love it. Yes, thank you.
Raffi, you were born in Cairo in Egypt from a Turkish-Armenian background. In their culture, was Patong a big thing? Because it seems to have come through the DNA, and you're such a good player.
Oh, thank you very much for saying that. I don't think it's true, but no, there was nothing of Patong in my culture at all.
Well, that's what I thought. I didn't think it quite came from there.
Yeah.
Raffi, one of the things you're undertaking and you're enjoying is writing your childhood memoirs. It might be a good way for you to introduce yourself by just reading a few chapters.
I'd love to very much. And I just happen to have a copy here. So it starts off, it's a bit of a preface, and I just tell you a little bit about myself in general. I'm an Australian. I'm very proud of it. Yet every time I look at my Australian passport, I'm reminded that I wasn't born in Australia. In my passport, it will always be stated that my place of birth is Cairo, Egypt. I can never forget it, and I'm reminded that I'm not of this place, Melbourne. However briefly I lived in Egypt, I'm reminded of that place, that great place under the sun, a place with 5,000 years of civilization, which I inhabited for a mere 9 years and a bit. I can never forget it. I'm not allowed to. Neither do I want to. It is a part of me. Yet that is not the whole of me, because I'm also Armenian. Now, Armenians are a stubborn, enduring, suffering, mysterious race of people that grew and built great things and were killed and dispossessed and exiled and grew and built again. It is a race that inspired the creation of the word genocide. The Armenian genocide was what both my grandfathers escaped from, to Egypt, a country that greeted them and allowed them to grow and build again until living there was no longer possible. So I was born in Egypt, but I'm also an Armenian. And then we came to Australia, the greatest place to live on earth, so now I'm an Australian. But I can never forget where I came from, and neither can I forget my race. So that's me in a nutshell.
How excellent is that? Armenia is known for its culture, for its architecture, and for the fact that it was the first Christian society, and it also created the first church ever in the world.
That's right.
So it goes back a long way,
It does.
Deep culture.
Well, you've done a little bit of background study, haven't you? You're very correct. They are me, though. The family is me.
Yes.
You know, that's why I write about them.
Yeah.
And that's why I honour them. And I wrote my novel because I'd never met my grandfather. And the way that he died was very tragic.
Indeed.
And as I said, it affected my father his whole life. And so I wanted to honour him in his memory. My grandmother as well.
Is that a published novel?
No, it's not published.
Why
I'm
not?
struggling to get it published, but it appears that nobody wants to do it. It's a very long novel, very long indeed, 150,000 words, which is probably almost double what a normal novel is. But it was very purging for me to write it. I had to do a lot of research.
That number of words, the research must have been...
Well, it's not so much the words, because once I started writing, it was very easy.
Yeah.
I did research for 2 years before I even started writing. I read books, looked into old newspaper articles. I did a lot of research, made notes. My grandfather, because he looked after a farm for someone in Egypt, in the Delta area, Damanhur, he got that job because there was a cigarette firm in Egypt.
This is the one your father worked for?
Yes, the same one. Matosian was the guy who ran it, okay? He used to run this cigarette firm. It was quite one of the biggest. Matosian's cigarettes were quite a big thing in Egypt at the time. It was a private company, obviously. What happened is that one day they had a problem with the machinery. The machinery that rolls and cuts out the cigarettes crashed, and the normal engineer couldn't do anything about it. And they'd heard through the community that my grandfather was good with mechanical things. You know, he wasn't an engineer himself, but he was good with mechanical things. So they called him, and he came and fixed it, you know, and got it going. And this Matosian was eternally grateful.
I was going to say, you should be
to my grandfather for that, you know. And so he gave him the job to run. Matosian used to have a farm in the Delta, which was a cotton farm.
Right.
You know, he got him to look after that. Not that he knew anything about farm. So
he was like the farm manager?
Yes, the farm manager.
Supervisor?
Yes, supervisor. Very good, thank you. That's it. When I was researching, I had to research the cotton industry in Egypt in the 1910s, you know, because that's what we're talking about. I found books written in that era that had been republished, books by British people who were assessing the cotton industry at the time, because in those days the British ruled everything in Egypt.
And everywhere else.
And where else, yeah. Anyway, I researched that. I had to research even the machinery that they were using. And you wouldn't believe it, but I found some of that machinery. There's a group in America, it's like a hobby for them. They get old machinery, and because there was a cotton industry in America as well, of course. This group, as a hobby, restore their equipment. There was a YouTube video about it, so I could actually see how the thing worked,
right,
and how it sounded. So I did a lot of that, made a lot of notes for 2 years, and then I started writing. And of course, to begin with, you see, because my father was so upset about his own father's death, he never spoke about it.
No.
And so I was very frustrated about that, because I wanted to know. And so eventually, it was only the last year or so of his life that he suddenly opened up, and I just madly scribbled everything down. I had like 3 or 4 pages of handwritten stuff. So from that, there were things that I'd never known about him and his family, and it was all down there. So I just kept on to that, not knowing what to do with it. Eventually, after I retired, or even just slightly before, I started really thinking about it, because I really wanted to write more than anything. I didn't particularly want to pursue what I was doing, and I'd had enough by then anyway.
This is still your creativity that wants to come out.
Yeah.
Combined with your passionate feelings for the family.
Family and the community, my heritage.
That's fantastic. So when did you start the book, and when did you complete it?
Well, I completed it about maybe 3 years now, yeah. And I really tried very hard to get a publisher and then to get an editor. I tried everything. It's very, very, very difficult, as anyone would know, to get something published. I mean, I may succumb to the end to self-publish, which is going to be expensive, but...
Very?
Yeah.
Or publishing online?
Yes, I kind of feel that I don't like publishing online.
Yeah, it diminishes the whole concept of it, really, doesn't it?
It does, and I feel I always like to have this physical thing, I don't know, put it on my bookshelf, and see that it's there all the time. I mean, my brother said, why don't you do it as a podcast, in sessions, like a chapter at a time, and people listen to lots of podcasts. But I don't know, I just feel that it would disappear into the ether and be lost, Yeah, so to answer your original question, it took me 5 years to write, but the 3 years of writing, the 2 years of research and 3 years of writing, it came very easily, especially after I'd stopped working and we had COVID. So most people were knitting at the time, but I was writing.
Now, you said after you retired. Retired from what?
Okay, retired from being a video producer. Well, I worked for a long time for the TAFE system. So I was doing instructional videos, and training and promotional videos. And I did that for, all in all, probably for TAFE about 30 years. Yeah. And then, there were cutbacks and things, and I lost the job, and I started working for myself for a couple of years, which wasn't very lucrative. It was just to keep me going. I'd really given up thinking that I was ever going to find another job like that, because they were very rare, extremely rare. But it turned out that there was a job with the Defence Department, which I went for, and so another 10 years I was doing that. Yeah, it was a bolt from the sky. I didn't expect it.
Where did you do your training?
Okay, going back, I did my training what was called Melbourne State College at the time. Then eventually it merged with Melbourne University. It's a teacher's college, yeah. I got onto it rather strangely, because what I'd really want to be at that time when I finished high school, and I'd had these amazing results at HSC, and I'd got this scholarship at Melbourne Uni. I had a scholarship to study art history. I had a back of my mind something to be an art curator, but my parents kind of ridiculed that a little bit, a bit airy-fairy, but they just couldn't understand what the hell, what is art history after so many years of study, what can you do with that? They didn't even know what an art curator was,
right.
Then my other choice was to do painting, a course in painting at RMIT. I went for that because my parents, again, were saying, you've got to have something. That was even worse. So what are you going to do with painting? Well, painting what? The thing was that I could then do a diploma of education and be an art teacher. And that's what most people did in those days. You couldn't just go on and have a career in art, really, unless you had something behind you.
Yes.
And my parents weren't wealthy, So that was the plan, but it was a horrible plan, absolutely shocking, because in matric, in HSC, it was, yeah, HSC, I was really into art. I did very well at it, and we had a very good teacher, an amazing guy who was incredibly forward-thinking. He was a real inspiration. And so that got me going. I did very well. I mean, I'd had years of thinking I was going to do art. I had a lot of things previously. I'd gone through, as most children do, go through all sorts of things. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it just changes every year or so. You know, I was going to be a priest at one point. But anyway, there you go. And so I was really full of confidence at that point. But when I started this course at RMIT, it was the absolute opposite of everything that I had expected to do with art. RMIT was like a trade school. You could compare it to a trade school. Originally, that's what it was. It was all trades. But they taught art like a trade. And it was extremely technical. And there was no room for anybody to interpret anything, particularly in the first year. So, I mean, we were painting bowls of fruit, you know, for the whole of the year. You know, it was unbelievable to me, to my sort of forward-thinking mind that had instilled in me my art teacher, you know. This was the 70s, man, you know, like it was near the 70s anyway. And it was like, come on, get on with it. What is this, you know?
I spent some time at RMIT.
Yeah, so you would know, you know. It was horrible. It was grey and gritty.
So you got out of that? And
I got out of that, but not in a very good way, because I sort of went against what they were doing early on. It really sent me to sleep a lot of the classes, because especially theories of colour and whatever, and anyway, I couldn't accept the way they were doing things, and I just banged my head against a brick wall for about 6 months, and then I just gave up and I just walked out. That was just threw everything away, just walked out and moped about the house for the next 6 months in my dressing gown. You know, I was really miserable. They were really miserable.
And your parents were really impressed with this?
They weren't very impressed, no. But they didn't know what to do. Anyway, just luckily, I ran into a good friend of mine, Tom, who shared the art prize with me at school. I just ran into him in the city. I don't know how it happened. And then he was telling me he's doing this, Raffi, you know, come and do this course with me. This is at Melbourne State College. They've got drama, they've got film, they've got television, they've got photography. You'd love it. And it's great. It's so modern. It's so free. It's so open. And I got really excited by all
I could imagine you would after going through what you've been through.
Yeah, but I didn't have very much confidence. And my mother actually dragged me to the college. Very embarrassing. I remember this image of me in the tram going to the city. My mother was taking me along, you know, like she was taking me shopping. We got to get you a shirt, you know, whatever. Anyway, I got there, and it was just a sort of spoken interview with the guy who was the head, Ron Danielson. He was a lovely man, very intelligent, wonderful. It was so new, and I got in, right? Before I knew it. I was in because it was a studentship base. Suddenly I had a superannuation account. So just from nothing. So it was great. I'll tell you, I'll never forget the 1970s. It was absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic break. You loved it, obviously. What did you enjoy most while you were doing that?
Well, it's hard to say, but the first year was brilliant in that it was absolutely liberal in the drama class, for example. In drama in the first year, everybody was running around in leotards and black leotards and T-shirts, and basically they were just into movement and touchy-feelies, you know. It was just totally...
Bit hard for me to imagine you in a leotard.
I know, but please do. But not in my current shape. And that was amazing. It was just amazing. It was fun. It was just fun, you know. It was just playing. You know, it's coming.
Exactly the opposite where you've come from. You got into puppetry as well?
Oh, later, yes. Later we did what happened in the second and third year. This is just in drama. But in the same time, I was also doing media studies, or, well, they called it film and television then. So we were doing Super 8 and we were doing black and white, reel-to-reel television, you know, and also photography. Had a great Valentine was his name, is a German guy. And he was brilliant. Anyway, they're doing photography as well. And, well, you wouldn't believe music. And I had no background at all in music, apart from the choir at school or something. But here I was doing a music subject. And they were just... That was part, because it was called the Creative Arts course. I can't imagine anything more suitable for me, you know. And so it was a creative arts course, and I was doing music. I was learning the classical guitar. I had two brilliant teachers. I really got into it. I was quite good for a while. Then I didn't keep it up. And so I was doing that. And then in the second year in drama, the second and third year, it sort of changed because... this fellow came from England. His name was David Lander. He brought with him an experience in improvisation. He was perhaps incredibly talented person, a very great teacher, had a brilliant rapport with everyone, terribly energetic. He wanted to just work with a limited number of people intensely for a couple of years. And Ron allowed him to do that. And so there was this offer. Do you want to be part of David Lander's improvisation group? There was limited places. And I'm denied, because the alternative would have been to do various other electives. And so when you chose that, it was like you didn't have to do anything else, because it was everything, you know, apart from doing performances and so on. And so I got into that, and it was like, poof, I can't tell you how intense it was. It was really, really incredible.
But you enjoyed every moment of it.
Absolutely. I enjoyed every moment. And improvisation to me, even to this day, is everything. It's everything. Because it's the equivalent of writing. It is writing without even thinking. And it's just creating. There's a flow, a creative flow that comes if you allow yourself to get into the space. It was all about preparing yourself for it and doing it. And then what happened was this little group, I think initially it was just 10 or 12 people, and it dwindled down further. It came to about 6 or 8 eventually, which was became even more intense. But we formed this group called Mad Hat Theatre, and we did everything. We improvised street theatre. We'd go out on the street and just improvise theatrical pieces, just made up completely. We'd say, oh, think of a person, think of a situation, think of a place, and that's all we needed. And then we'd start. And somebody would start and come in, and the thing was never to block anyone. You know what that means? That is that like when you come in and somebody gives you an idea or a thought, you accept it, you take it and you fly with it. So we would do that. We'd do that in the street theatre, and then whenever there was a festival or something, we'd be performing a Moomba, we'd go and do something. And then David got some funding, and we would do tours. We did a country tour of all the schools in the country, basically. And then we went to the Sydney Arts Festival, and then we went to South Australia and did the Arts Festival there. We did a tour of Sydney schools. It was amazingly intense, and I was loving every damn second of it. I just loved it. I just wished it would go on and on and on. But the thing was, unfortunately, that what's the end? The end is teaching.
Right.
Okay, people are paying me a studentship every fortnight. They're not going to just say, well, okay, bye-bye, off you go. You were a slave for 3 years. You had to teach. Also, they just sent you wherever you wanted, whatever they wanted in Victoria. And people went to Dimboola, to Nil, to Derranellum. I mean, some of these places you wouldn't even know what they were, but that's where people got sent. But anyway, that was the 3 years. And then the final year was meant to be the year where they taught you how to teach. Because before that, there was nothing about teaching in this course. Absolutely nothing. It was just on the subject, the content, So in the final year, they made a special group because they realised that all these people doing drama and film and television, they had no idea, these people. They had no idea about writing essays or anything about teaching. And so they formed a special group called the D team, and most of the drama guys and media guys got into that group because it was more liberal than the others, and you had to do less essays than the others. There was, I remember, a subject called educational sociology, which was, okay, let me go to sleep here. Thankfully, I didn't have to write too much about that. It was mostly just discussion because that was the openness of it. We could just discuss, and every once in a while they'd say, oh, you better write this thing, And then at one point they said, oh, well, instead of writing this time, we'll let you run a session with the other people. This will be like a teaching sort of session. You'll use the other people in the D group. You can do anything. This is how open it was. You can say, do anything. So people were doing dance, teaching people how to dance, ballroom dancing. Another guy did mushrooms. He took him on a trip to the country and how to pick mushrooms and what to do with it, which one of the poisonous ones and so on. And I did one on relaxation. So obviously a skill that I'd learned from drama. I did a session where everybody was just lying on their back and listening to my voice.
How serendipitous it was, you bumping into your school.
Absolutely. I got in touch with him lately. He went on, he was a very good photographer, and he went on and had a career in Sydney. I don't know what it was, but I suddenly reached out and I found his name and I got in touch with him.
I hope you brought him lunch.
No, he's in Sydney. And he said, please come down. He told me our old art teacher had just passed away. He'd been living with him, the art teacher. We were very close.
It's interesting you talk about that art teacher. I've heard this before, and I've experienced it myself. Yeah. A teacher can either make or break you.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, the ones I had
broke you. Yeah, that's people. Unfortunately, they don't understand how important a job it is. Yeah. It's absolutely yeah.
But before high school, before primary school, you had to get out here.
Ah, yes.
How did you get out here?
How did we get out here? All right. Well, why did we get out here first? Can I answer that question? Well, because at the time, 1950s is when I was born. I mean, Egypt already had a revolution in 1952, but nothing much changed after that revolution until 1956. When Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, became the president, said, look, nothing's changed, We've had this treaty with the British, but everything's going on as before, and we still feel like we're second-class citizens. So what he said was, well, first of all, he said, we're going to nationalise the Suez Canal. We're going to take it over, that's it. That's ours. Right. We built it. And they did. They had built it. You can hear about Ferdinand de Lesseps and all the engineers and everybody. Then the Egyptians built it. And they lost a lot of people building it. Thousands upon thousands of Egyptians died building it. Anyway, he felt that it was theirs. I can tell you there is nothing more important in Egypt than the Suez Canal. That is it. Without it, you don't have a country. So he just walked in with his army one day and took it over. We went into the offices and said, all right, piss off. We're taking over. But the upshot of that was, well, first of all, there was a war because the Brits still owned it, supposedly. Didn't want to give it up. The French had a stake. They didn't want to give it up. And then the Israelis took the opportunity to jump in, and there was a war. It was called the Suez Crisis. And it was really a shameful part of the history, really, because I really think that the Suez Canal was Egypt's and should have been Egypt's. Anyway, there was a war. It would not have gone on very well for the Egyptians. They would have lost for sure. But the rest of the world wasn't happy with the war, and the Americans in particular. While the Americans were against it, the Russians saw an opportunity, as they always do, and thought, okay, well, we'll support the Egyptians. We might get something out of it. What happened was, because the Russians had possibly could have got involved militarily, and the Americans didn't want to have a war, and so the thing just abated and just stopped. It wasn't really a war, it was a crisis. That's why they call it a crisis.
So this impacted upon your family?
Yes, because what happened after that was that Nasser continued on with the same sort of policy. Right. And what happened was not only nationalised the canal, but almost every major company in the country. As you might know, the European presence or the European communities, Egypt was an incredibly cosmopolitan place. There were Greeks, Italians, French, Maltese, you name it. There was every race in the world in there. And they were all happily living together. It was a beautiful place, actually. What happened was all these people, otherwise known as Europeans by the Egyptians, they had a word for them, which was a derogatory word, khawaga, which meant it's almost like outsider, but noble outsider. You know, you think you're something big, because the way they used to use that word was with derision, and you think you're something, but it's just... so that's when... Already the sentiment was quite strong against these European communities, but after 1956 they felt licensed to be openly critical. And the taking over of all companies, well, of course, most of them were owned by Europeans, so that meant suddenly overnight they had no income. And a lot of them would see the writing on the wall and they just wanted to get out. There was a thing called Arabization, which was happening because in those days, prior to the revolution, everything was in English. Administration, business, everything was in English. In fact, I went to an English school myself. I never learned Arabic. I didn't have to. Yeah, believe it or not, that's right. It was only in the last year that I was there that finally, with this Arabization policy, they said, okay, whatever school you are, doesn't matter whether you're private or public, you're going to learn Arabic, you know. And so 1 year I had of Arabic when I was 9 or 8, actually, at the time. Yeah, that was a bit weird for me. Anyway, with this Arabization policy and the taking over of companies and everything, everybody felt very insecure, that they're all against us. There's no future here for us. There's no future for our children. We have to get out. And a lot of people in the 1960s got out. A lot. 63 in particular was the year that we came. A lot of people from Egypt.
Why Australia? Okay. Had you known something about it?
No, not very much, except we're desperate, okay? Yeah. We're like people running. There were only 3 places that offered an immigration policy. Australia wanted people at the time. Canada wanted people, and South Africa wanted people. We had to make a decision. Where do we go? Create a division in the family. My father, who had already lost one sister early on because she went to Armenia after the war, it was in the Soviet Union at that time. and they wanted Armenians to come back. And so they opened the doors and said, oh, we'll even pay you, come. And at the time, my aunt, my father's sister, who was married to this guy who was a bit of a brute, actually. He lost his job, I think, at one point, and he was violent towards my aunt. And my father, who was still really looking after them then, unbelievably and very not sort of normal for him, because of a very peaceful person, he got very angry. And he went over to his sisters and he grabbed his brother-in-law by the throat and said, you hurt my sister again, you'll get it. And I can't imagine him doing that, but this is how my mother describes it, They went to Armenia in 1948. Very soon after that, the Iron Curtain came down. So they were stuck there. Yes. And not only my aunt, but also my grandmother. I wasn't born then, so I never saw my grandmother. I never met her. And so she went over with her to give her support. That's the only way that my father would allow it. My grandmother and my aunt went to Armenia, and the curtain came down, stuck there. That's it. They couldn't get out. So then, when we came to decide where to go, there was only one other sister that my father had. She was lovely. Her husband and she, I think she was part of the decision, were really, they were French speaking. Not only, but they liked French culture, and so they were more attracted to Canada. And they said, oh, we want to go to Canada. It's closer to the United States where everything happens. It's French speaking. We want to go to Montreal. My father just couldn't do anything about it. Just said, what are you doing? You're breaking up the family again, And that was that. And so that was the last vestige almost of my father's family. And so at the time that we were deciding where to go, they went to Canada, and we had two choices then left, because we weren't going to go to Canada because then it was my mother's family who was bigger. They had more members, as it were, and they all wanted to be together. So they had to decide where to go together, and they weren't going to go to Canada because it's so damn cold.
Yes.
They're not going to Canada from living in the most beautiful, warm climate in the world, going off to Canada. So no, they said no. And then it was, okay, South Africa. No, we're not having that racial problems again. No, we're not going to South Africa. So Australia. We didn't know anything about it. Really didn't know anything about it. And I remember going to the Australian Embassy, had a sort of an evening, a film night, and we all trooped over there. And I was at the embassy, the chair set up and a projector put up, and there's this film about Australia, beautiful colour movie about... And I remember so much about that movie. But it was... a very positive image, shall we say, of Australia.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
Yeah. Anyway, at the end of it, I think my parents had already decided. And there was this big thing about getting the visas. Oh, when are the visas going to arrive? It took forever. And there was a problem, because Australia had a white Australia policy, okay? And you wouldn't believe it, but they thought that we may not be white. Yeah. And that's the whole Armenian community. Of course, my aunt, again, my mother's sister, was at the centre of trying to get them to agree that we were not black. We might be sunburned, but we're not black guys. We are from Caucasian mountains. We are Caucasians.
That's right.
We're it, So I remember that. I remember Mr. Redpath, who was the member from the embassy. He used to come and sit and talk, and I listened into conversations that he had and the arguments that he was putting forward and the arguments that we put forward. And, of course, he kind of accepted, but then he had to go back to his head honcho and say, this is the situation. Anyway, finally, after quite a long time and lots of discussions about visas, it eventually arrived. And so we sold everything. We had to sell everything because we could not take money out of the country, a limited amount. Yep. That was rather sad. And then, of course, once people know that you're getting out, and of course everybody knew that all the Armenians and all the communities, Europeans are getting out. And they'd come to the house and they'd say, sell it for nothing. And eventually not sell anything, then the stuff was put out onto the pavement and people would come and take it. We had nothing. And what Mum did basically was, what could we take with us? And there was a distant relative who lived in Australia at the time. She had said, bring clothes, because clothes are very expensive here. So Mum packed 7 years of clothes for us, for my brother and I. Because we had nothing. We came with nothing. And so...
where did you come to?
Okay. We got on a ship, the SS Roma. It was the most wonderful time for me that I've ever had. The most fun. It was 3 and something weeks, and I had the liberty of the ship.
And you were, what, 8 or 9 at this?
I was 9, just 9, and I had so much fun on that ship. I fell in love with this little girl, 9-year-old.
Of course you did.
Her name was Mary, I remember. White face, freckled.
You always remember your first, don't you?
You always remember your first. And we were inseparable towards the end. We had a lovely time. I actually met her because I saw her in the pool and she was drowning. She was splashing about in the pool. I couldn't swim, but I dived in. Yeah. I loved Tarzan movies at the time, so I dived in. And then I remembered I can't swim, so I was kind of splashing about myself. And eventually I grabbed hold of her arm and we splashed together to the edge, and that was that. Yes.
That must have been like an adventure in Disneyland, being on at your age coming across there.
Absolutely.
So did you come straight to Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. We birthed at Fremantle first.
Yes.
That was the thing, you go through from Port Said, you stop at Aden, and then you cross the huge ocean. You have your equator crossing celebrations.
Did all that exactly the same.
You did?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I still have my certificate for crossing the equator.
Oh, right. Wow.
Anyway.
So we're Fremantle, and that's where Mary left the ship. So that was bye-bye Mary. Then we went to Melbourne, and we arrived at night. When we were sitting in the bay, Port Phillip Bay, and we were waiting for the clearance to go into the port, we all sort of excitedly came out onto the verandas, the ship, and saw all these twinkling lights across. Oh, it's so beautiful!
So you must have come when the weather was good as well.
Yeah, that's right. We came March the 10th, Moomba, yeah. The day we landed, it was Moomba. Our uncle, who had already arrived, and his wife and our cousin, they'd come first. So they came and picked us up from the wharf. It wasn't very, swish. At the port, it was really quite run down even then.
Yes.
And it was basically a shed that we had to go through to get clearance and all that.
Did you end up having to go to a migrant hostel, or were you able to go straight
No,
out?
because my aunt and uncle put us up. But they were living in a half house in Windsor, a half house. Yes. And so they put out camp stretchers, beds, and my brother and I were in there. I don't even know where my mum and dad fitted, because it would have only been a 2-bedroom place. And tiny, I just remember it so dark and dingy, and, with a long corridor on one side. So we were in there. They looked after us for about 3 months or maybe a bit longer, until we found an apartment which is not very far away from them in St Kilda. We lived in that apartment for a long time. I've got lots of stories about that, but you probably don't want to hear it.
Well, okay, we've gone back to the beginnings of when you got here. It's coming to the other end now.
Yeah.
Well, some of the highlights, I would imagine, for you are that you started the Armenian Heritage Centre.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't really exist anymore, as far as I know, because I started that, quite a few years before I retired, a long time ago actually. Anyway, I wanted to do something because my experience had always been, when I told people that I was Armenian or had Armenian heritage, they'd look blankly at me all the time and say, "What? Who? Indian? No, Armenian. Oh, Albanian? No. Anyway, I have that all the time. I'd get it all the time. And I thought that what we needed was something that would celebrate and promote Armenian culture in Melbourne.
And be an educational thing as well.
Educational thing. Tell people about it. And the way we would do it is by having exhibitions, events, festivals, theatre, anything. So I couldn't do that by myself. I struggled over that thought. And I was close to my cousin at the time, who was about the same age as me, and she's very heavily into the church and particularly into this organisation called the AGBU, which is a worldwide Armenian General Benevolent Union, worldwide, and very, very active and does brilliant work. I mean, she was part of the Melbourne chapter. But it was a mistake because, she said, "Look, why don't you start this organisation within the AGBU? Because you need a name. Nobody will know who the Armenian Heritage Centre is. How are you going to get funding for things and so on? And we've got people that can help." Well, it was true in some way, but anyway, I ummed and ahed about it because I really, really did want to be independent. But I couldn't get other people engaged. They probably would have said, like a lot of the people in the community say, "Oh, what a great idea," but I don't want to be part of it. You know how it is. It's just normal, I guess. But anyway, I didn't have connections to the community very much in those days. So I accepted to do that. We incorporated it into the AGBU, and in the beginning it was all right. We started off with the Immigration Museum, but I was able to sort of basically conceive of every project and offer it up as something that we could do. Basically, I had two other people, my cousin and a lady who was a librarian at the library in Melbourne, the Victorian Library in Melbourne. She's very, very good and very knowledgeable, had a lot of contacts and knowledge of things, particularly Armenian history and culture and so on. So it was just the three of us. And I would always come up with the idea and the structure. And then the three of us would get together and say, well, how do we do this? How do we put this thing together? And there was always funding involved. We had to get funding. And so, again, it was me who applied for the funding, because they didn't even know at the time, those people, how to even, that funding was available and that they could apply for it. Anyway, I did that. We were quite successful, and every couple of years we did something, a major project. And one of the things is because, I was telling you about people looking at me and saying, well, where the hell is Armenia?
Yeah.
I got sick of that. I actually created a little laminated card with a map, of Armenia and where it is in the region, And one sort of project we were handing these out, people put it in their back pocket, and anybody asked them, "What's Armenia?" Flash. So, that was that. It was good. It was really great. For 10 years I did, and had really good projects, and some of them lasting, but people would come and applaud and say great, and then they'd say, "What are you doing next?" Towards the end I was getting tired, and I said, "We need to get some more people involved here. Where are they?" So we had this thing where we'd sort of go out to people who were educated in the community, and there were many, of course, because education's big with Armenians. Contact them and say, we want to be part of this. Nobody wanted to, and eventually I just said, I've had enough.
Good run. So of all those things, and you've said there's a number of highlights, being on the boat when you were 9 is a highlight. I would imagine the Armenian project it is a highlight.
Yeah.
But what is, to you, the greatest highlight?
Well, I think I've already spoken about a few of them. I think my best time was what I've already described, was when I was studying drama. I really had just a brilliant time. Coming from where I was at the time, like down here, and then I just went up there. Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah, you owe that friend of yours an awful lot.
Yeah, that's right.
How on earth did you find Petanque?
Okay, well, that's easy. I've always been interested in French things because my parents spoke French. Most of my family spoke French, along with other languages. So I knew quite a bit about its culture. Not sure that I knew about Petanque, but where I was living years ago was in McDonald Street, Mordialloc, and opposite was a bowling club. And at one point, a sign turned up on the fence, and it was literally directly opposite. Couldn't miss it. Just walk out, and I could see, I think I saw initially that some people were preparing these pistes. I didn't know at the time that they were pistes. I was wondering, what the hell are they doing? They're putting in these funny little barriers in there and putting gravel and stuff. And what is that? I didn't have that question answered until they put the sign up saying Petanque players invited or wanted or whatever. One day I just went out when they were actually there, and they saw me looking and said, come in, come on in. There were about 6 or 8 people basically, and that was the club then. That was actually, the club was Long Beach, which had just been lost their place where they were on the beach in, Seaford was. And so they had lost that place for whatever reason. I think the bowling club wanted to do something. And anyway, they'd been searching around, they found this place, and the bowling club in Mordialloc said, okay, this is, a dead area, you can have this. And so they did. And there were only half a dozen people, 6 or 8 people. It was great. Nice people, and I just got onto that and started playing.
So serendipity has played a big part in your life in lots of areas.
Yeah, I think it often does for a lot of people. I guess if it wasn't that, it'd be something else.
But I'm pleased it was Petanque.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, no, I really loved it from the beginning. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Raffi, thank you for all your time. It has been thoroughly interesting, and I'm going to enjoy listening to this myself, as will all of the people that do tune in and listen. So thank you, Raffi.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
What a fascinating insight into another Camberwell Petanque Club member. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. When you next see Raffi, ask him exactly where Armenia is, and see if you can book a pre-order for his novel. Thank you for listening to universalexports.co. This series of A Story to Tell will take a little break. In the meantime, you can listen to previous episodes of this series and others, as well as the other podcasts, Sound Bits and Petanque Points podcast at the website universalexports.co. That's universalexports, one word, .co, not com. Rex out.
Sick of Rex.